All right, it is an incredibly busy week ahead. The arraignment of former President Donald Trump is expected Tuesday, the same day voters across Wisconsin head to the polls. The hotly contested state Senate race and the race for state Supreme Court front and center.
Candidates in that race in the final sprint this weekend ahead of Election Day. Former Justice Daniel Kelly, the Republican-backed candidate, in the midst of a statewide tour this weekend ahead of Tuesday's election. His opponent, the Democratic-backed candidate, Milwaukee County Judge Janet Protasiewicz, crisscrossing the state as well.
The stakes and the spending couldn't be higher. The most expensive state Supreme Court race in U.S. history, with the balance of the high court at stake.
Our roundtable is here to break it all down. Republican strategist Bill McCoshen, Democrat Joe Zepecki. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Let's get right into it and talk about the Trump indictment. How does this play out in a battleground state like Wisconsin, Bill?
Probably two parts. There's a legal part and there's a political part. On the legal side, most legal scholars think that it's a flimsy case and probably won't go anywhere. Could even get thrown out in the next couple of months. So I don't think there's a lot of risk for Trump on the legal side. On the political side, it may have some short-term benefits. For example, there are people who believe that the raid on Mar-a-Lago may have helped Tim Michels win the GOP primary for governor last summer because of the timing. It happened just before the primary between Michels and Kleefisch. I'm not one that subscribes to that, but it may give a boost to Trump voters over the weekend to get out and work extra hard for Daniel Kelly for Supreme Court.
That first primary debate is in August here in Milwaukee. Joe, impact?
Too soon to tell. I mean, there's so much we don't know right now. We're hearing reports this could be as many as 34 counts. You know, there's an old saying that a Manhattan grand jury could indict a ham sandwich. Well, listen, no ham sandwich is above the law, and every ham sandwich is innocent until proven guilty. But you don't often hear about 30-plus counts when it comes to a ham sandwich. So let's just take a breath here and see what's really going on.
Bill, you talked about timing, which is pretty interesting. Tuesday is when we could see an arraignment for the former President Donald Trump, which is the same day. Obviously, voters are heading to the polls across Wisconsin. What type of impact do you see on the state Supreme Court race from what we're seeing in New York?
I think it is possible it could motivate Trump supporters throughout the weekend to try and get out there for Daniel Kelly the last 4 days of the race and make sure that, you know, this is close. Every indication is this race is tightening at the end. The Protasiewicz campaign is spending millions, literally millions of dollars. The Kelly campaign is spending what they have, but third parties are matching the Protasiewicz campaign. So I don't think both sides would be loading up and unloading their cannons if they didn't think that they had a chance. So I think there's an opportunity for Kelly here at the end.
The politics cut both ways, right? This may be a motivator for conservative voters. It's also a motivator for Democrats. Listen, when Trump was in the White House, Republicans lost control of Congress in 2018. He lost the presidency in 2020. Republicans had a worse than expected year in 2022. A lot of people say that's because of Donald Trump. I have a hard time believing that Mr. Trump being indicted is all of a sudden going to be a political panacea for conservatives.
Let's talk a little bit more about the state Supreme Court race. From your insights, how close are we talking here?
I think it has narrowed, to Bill's point, but I think we agreed, 6 weeks ago that Protasiewicz would enter this race with an advantage, and when that's the start of a race, the other candidate has to try to change the dynamic. I'm not sure former Justice Kelly was ever able to do that. Today, going into this on Tuesday, you would rather be Judge Protasiewicz.
Yeah, I would say that, Jaron, maybe the finance report that was released this week could change that dynamic. I think people are opening their eyes saying, holy smokes, why is the governor of Illinois giving $1 million to the Democratic Party of Wisconsin that ultimately was transferred to the Protasiewicz campaign? Why is Hollywood director Steven Spielberg and his wife donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to this race? 80% of the Protasiewicz money is coming in from out of state, and I think that's deeply troubling to Wisconsin voters. And frankly, it's coming out in the final week of the campaign, so ideally that's going to help Kelly.
You're smirking. Does this show Democrats are better at fundraising than Republicans in the state?
Right now they are.
Bill sounds like I used to sound when Governor Walker was running time after time.
Let's talk about the spending in this race. Our editorial partner, WisPolitics.com, tabulating all the spending. They currently have it surpassing $45 million when you look at everything. About $24.5 million supporting Protasiewicz, $19.2 supporting Kelly. What impact does all of this money have on this race?
It's staggering. I mean, $45 million, I think it'll go north of $50 million before it's all said and done. The previous record for United States a state Supreme Court race was 15 million. We've tripled that. And I think that should be troubling to voters across the state. Why are people spending that kind of money for a Supreme Court race? So, the hope is that money won't be the determining factor. If it is, Protasiewicz clearly has an advantage. She's got more money in her personal account. You can buy more ads from the personal account than third parties can from theirs. So there's no question she's got a fundraising advantage. But I think the organization statewide now for Kelly is as good as I've seen in a long time. Republicans are fired up statewide. I think they understand what's at stake here, and they're going to get out and vote.
Are you shocked by the spending?
Surprised but not shocked. I take the over. I mean, listen, this is sort of the natural evolution of the way these races have gone for the last 10 years or so. And to me, what the impact is, we should start with, we should see close to, if not record turnout. Around 1.5 million people will vote in this.
Because of the money?
That helps because people understand
our turnout has
race.
been projecting up.
They know what's at stake. And so what I would just tell your viewers is that's still only half as many people as vote in a presidential election here in Wisconsin. So do your homework. Don't look at the ads. Just do your homework on the candidates. Get out there and vote. Everybody else is.
Yeah. Speaking of the ads, there have been a couple of them running on TV throughout the course of this campaign. In our interviews with both of the candidates here, Dan Kelly called Protasiewicz a serial liar. Protasiewicz said that Daniel Kelly is corrupt. Do you think that the future of statewide Supreme Court races is changed because of what we've seen this cycle?
I hope we can unring this bell. Listen, if you've been watching the way these races have gone, sadly, I think this is a natural evolution, and it's not healthy. It's not productive. And again, my message is, you can complain about it, you can dislike it. The one thing I would urge you not to do is stay home about it. The way to get change is to use your power and use your vote. It's sad, but here we are.
You would think that a race for a state Supreme Court would be high-minded and about issues and their judicial philosophy. It's sadly turned into an MMA match between them, and I'm not sure we can unring that bell. I hope we can, but driving in the car and you hear an ad against Kelly that calls him corrupt, if that were me, my attorneys would be sending a cease and desist letter immediately. That's a bridge too far.
When you look at the map on Tuesday, Bill, let's start with you. What is the path to victory for Kelly? What does he need to do?
He's got to minimize the deficit in Milwaukee and Dane County. That's been Democrats' ticket to 13 out of the last 16 statewide elections. Michaels lost Dane County by 173,000 votes. He lost Milwaukee County by a little bit less than that, but Democrats roll up their two big margins there. Where Michaels and Johnson differed in the fall was Johnson did better in the Bow counties, Brown, Outagamie, and Winnebago, than Michaels did. Dan Kelly's going to have to do really good in the Bow and the Wow counties if he wants to have a chance on Tuesday.
What does Judge Protasiewicz need to do?
Run up the score in Dane. There's no question that big blue machine is where it starts for us. And for me, as she's in the commanding position, it is incumbent on former Justice Kelly. He's got to find a way to try and pull back some of those women voters, especially in the WOW counties. If he can't do that, I'm not sure there is a path.
All right, gentlemen. Republican strategist Bill McCoshen, Democrat Joe Zepecki, thank you both for your time and perspective. Up next, Secretary of State fallout.
Newly appointed Secretary Sarah Godlewski standing by to respond.